allowing the sort of predictive programming that this election is going to be super, super close, right? To me, there seems to be, if you're the establishment or you really do want to get Kamala in, that one of the things you have to do is create the rhetorical narrative that this thing's going to be neck and neck. That way, when you do steal it, you can always say that it was just like 2020, it was neck and neck, and then she just happened to come out with, 10,000, 20,000 more votes in these swing states.
O Lord of hosts, be with us, for we have none other help in times of adversity but Thee. O Lord of hosts, have mercy on us.
I could see Donald Trump, the power structure, allowing him to be president to potentially bring in more military recruits and kind of further that escalation. But at the same time, he's recently said that he told Netanyahu that he has till January 20th to end the war, expecting to be president. And that's certainly a more stern voice of reason than even the Biden administration, who's kind of the media is portraying as like, oh, super pro Palestine, combating Zionism. Meanwhile, they're sending billions of dollars to Israel. I mean, the whole thing's kind of funny, but that's kind of my perspective. Is I can't see them allowing him to take. And obviously, the election, they brought in at least 20 million illegals. And they bring in them all over the red state. So I'm here in Indiana, and I was just made aware of somebody, a fellow Orthodox here in one of the chats of a previous stream, saying that down in Evansville, which is the kind of the most southern tip of Indiana, that they're bringing in thousands of Haitians. Same thing that they're doing in Springfield, Ohio. I live closer towards Indianapolis, south side of Indianapolis, and I've been informed. Our church, for example, the city that my church is in, we were informed by the police that thousands of Somalians and various immigrants, Afghanis, have been brought into the city, and that crime is up. And they recommended our parish to get update security systems, and potentially, because there was in Indianapolis an attack on a Catholic church, and we're Orthodox, not Catholic, but the police said potentially having somebody armed at the parish, they recommended based on things that were occurring. So the whole belief here is that they're putting these immigrants in red states. And I'm just saying, whether that is true or not, at least here in Indiana, something that is I can at least see with my own eyes, that is somewhat the case here. We've had a major influx of immigrants, and somehow they've made it all the way to the state of Indiana, and then they have various welfare programs for them to get housing and stuff like that. So curious, Jose, I know I kind of just rambled there, but what is your thought on this election? What do you think is going to happen? Obviously, I assume you believe if this was a legitimate election, Donald Trump would win in a landslide. If we actually had paper ballots and everybody voted on one day, let's say nobody went to work, everybody votes, and they're all counted that day, I think he would win in a massive landslide. But whole theme of this election is that we have to win so big that it's too big to rig, right? But what are your thoughts on the power plays at hand here and what's going on?
So if we're talking about, paper ballots, like my expectation would be that, Kamala would not even be able to pull 25% of the actual real voting population. I mean, the fact is she's the first person to make it. She literally made it to become a nominee of a party without getting a single vote in a primary. And if you look at her primary results in past primaries with the Democratic Party, it's absolute. She's one of the worst performing candidates of all time. So it's not even, I guess it's not even a joke. Like, I mean, for goodness sake, one of the Kennedys has switched over to join with Trump. Tim Walz's own family has endorsed Trump.
I saw that. Yeah, that's got to hurt a little bit.
It's, it's, I've never seen more unlikable candidates that have been put up in American history. And I mean, even going back to like the crazy contested elections like 1876, where, after the fact admit, yeah, there was a ton of fraud, but it's even compared to those, there's just exceedingly unlikable candidates.
Right.
And even the whole trying to portray her as being black, when she's of Jamaican Indian heritage, and her family were the slave owners and the slave drivers. So that's it's just so artificial in that regard. In terms of what I see this election is, so as most probably already know, I tend to look at things in terms of oligarch power plays. This election is the first election in my lifetime where you have a genuine split in the oligarchy that run the United States.
Right.
And that genuine split it didn't exist in 2016. It exists now. And that genuine split means that we could see a, quote, transition in power. But the other risk is, in general, I mean, the last time the United States had a genuine oligarchical split, you had the civil rights movement and all the violence surrounding it. And then the one before that, you had a civil war. So that's the downside. The downside is things probably will get very violent. The upside is you may actually have a shot at a change in who's actually running the empire.
Yeah, the split in the power structure, that's been really interesting to analyze. We talked in previous streams about JD Vance, his ties to Peter Thiel, Thiel's venture capitalist operations, and some of the stuff he's done, like Parambrosia, infusing people with young people's blood, um, AI, all types of stuff, brain chips. He's already invested in all that stuff. And then you have Elon Musk doing the exact same thing. And then JD Vance kind of tied to that power structure. And I think Mark Andreessen and David Sachs have all came out in favor of Donald Trump. And so there is a split within at least the tech elite, in how they're going about this election. And so I mean, we already see the voter fraud in multiple states. Kentucky, one of the machines was flipping people's votes, was occurring in Pennsylvania. Maricopa County in Arizona said it's going to take up to a week before they have all their stuff done. Same thing with the state of Nevada. So I could see a play out of 2020. What is your thoughts? And Nadeem and Ivan, welcome, brothers. Feel free to jump in as well. But what is your feeling on the integrity of the election? Do you think Trump's going to win, or do you think that that it's just they're going to rig it one way or another? And Alex Jones, his argument right now is that they're going to sort of substantiate a civil war by the time of January 6th or whatever, and never pass the torch of power. But what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I thought you were sorry. Congrats to DPH for your
Thank
marriage.
you, brother.
Jenny, I haven't talked to you since, so glory to God for that. I think we can be happy for you in some way, and maybe not for what's to aspire in your guys' country. But I think it's fairly obvious that the actual candidate would be Trump to win the actual race if it's done properly. I think we all know it won't in some
Right.
case, but I have hope that Trump wins, even though it's just handing over to another elite. It's not as bad to have just an illusion that someone's running the country rather than just like a complete idiot as the face of the US. So, but my rational side says that it might be rigged. It might be 2020 2.0. The voting fraud that we've seen, the military not being able to vote, the votes being delayed for weeks. I don't think that ever happened in any country for a presidential election or someone ruling a country. So, but I let maybe Ivan has a specific idea about who's becoming president.
Yeah. Well, Jose, what are your thoughts on, and we'll get John in and Ivan, but what are you guys' thoughts on the legitimacy of the election? Obviously, there's a lot more eyes on it, so certainly people are more aware. Even Laura Trump, I think she's head of the RNC right now. They haven't really done much legally speaking within the courts, but they claim that they have over 100,000 people across the country that are, whether they're pretending to be Democrats or they're working in these elections, at least have eyes on what's going on and try to document it. But Like, what are your guys' thoughts on the legitimacy of the election? Because I don't think anybody with a clear mind knows that Trump wins in a legitimate election, but we don't have that. So
Yeah, no,
I mean, I could go and vote now.
it's
It's
about what
crazy.
they let stand. So it's so I know like some things have gone to the courts and there have been rulings that have been done in the Republican favor, which indicates there are oligarchs with even with who are using the judicial system to favor things towards Trump. It's just a matter of who's going to what do you call it? Like who outdoes the other, and I don't mean in terms of legitimate votes, but who can play the game of counting votes better.
right,
That's what it comes down to. That was the case of like the JFK Nixon election,
right,
or Hayes election in 1876, for example. It's so that's the thing. So it's like, I mean, I know like in terms of like for those men out there who are trying to raise families, etc., the giant crazy high food bills that we've experienced under Biden and Harris have been truly awful, and those are going to get worse under Harris.
right,
So it's like it's a question of I mean, that's why like my hope is for Trump in that regard, because that's good for my pocketbook, that's good for my family.
right,
But the question comes down to what does the oligarch want, because they tend to not take into account the little guy, and historically in the United States they've never really taken into account the well-being of the little guy. So it just boils down to like, if they want a war with Russia, they're definitely going to stick with Harris. If they don't want a war with Russia and they want to refocus things towards Iran, they might let Trump in. And if they want a war with China, they'll probably let Trump in. It just comes. That's what it comes down to. It's that's why like for me, it's like, what are my expectations? I like to focus more on the expectations of if A wins or versus B wins, how does that affect me?
right,
I know like the big effect for any family man out there with the Kamala Harris victory is that the Trump tax cuts will expire by 2027. And the big issue with that in particular, the biggest problem is not just that the tax rates go up, it's the AMT stops being indexed to inflation and it reverts back to what it was back in 2016 or 17, whenever they did the cut, which means about 40 to 50% of all working men out there with, who head of households are going to get hit by the alternative minimum tax, which will be extremely devastating for those who are, have families. So it's like even me, like I was trying to do the math. Essentially, if that event happens, and given the Democratic Party's platform and given what the oligarchs care about, which is war, not really, and the financing of it. Frankly, if I suddenly found myself subject to the AMT, then my ability to save goes out the window, and forget home ownership. That's never going to happen.
right. Yeah, home ownership, my pocketbook, the economy. Whether Trump's part of an oligarchy, all that different stuff, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, I'm concerned less about that than what Jose's making the point. I just got married. I'm trying to think about a family. And I know that whatever you think of Donald Trump as a 90s Democrat, socially progressive, at least that would benefit me and my family. But John, Ivan, you guys got thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, well, I basically agree with everything that was said. I would put my hands in the fire, though, to say that Trump will probably win. And it's the same situation as what happened with Milei, in the sense that the difference is of such magnitude. Like the support for Trump is of such magnitudes higher than the support for Kamala, which is basically like I would say a puppet show with astroturfed, let's say, support invented on social media. I'd say that in itself, and the fact that Jose highlighted about that they're going to be playing the game about who can count votes the best, I think that will give Trump the win. So if I am correct, I do want to be like taking some brownie points for like risking my reputation on that. But yeah, I basically agree with you guys.
And the other part is the Republican Party does have the means of rigging things in their own favor, and they have done it in the past. 2000 would be an election where that happened. The whole hanging chads phenomena. To be frank, like the last neighborhood I lived in, when I lived in a city, there were two retired Republican fixers who lived on my block, and they would share stories, although they were mostly fixing elections in Ohio. So it's a thing. And it's pretty open about it. You can meet people, operatives for both parties, who will tell stories. I mean, even when I was in college, granted, but you're the people who tell stories about it. It's just, primaries, they're rigged from the get-go. It's you have rigging at all various levels, and sometimes it does make sense even because, like, even I remember talking with those two old guys, and they said, like, all right, if you genuinely had no plan, like no putting thumbs on the scale anywhere, even let's say, like, for example, let's just say, like, your local state party and you want to get people in there who are not blackmailable. Someone who's not blackmailable is not necessarily someone who is going to be popular on the primary election. And someone who's popular in the primary election could be someone who could be easily blackmailed. And so that weakens the party machine.
Right.
So, that's an example of like there are rigging things that's done, quote, positive in a sense, trying to, push things in a given direction. And it's just, that's how republics run. I mean, you can pick up Machiavelli's discourses on Livy or in his history of Florence. That's just how
would be an
work.
open panel without a mention of the discourses on Livy.
Yes, exactly. I'm always going to push that book because it explains so much of, like, just the intro to how republics work, how politics works, the politics of a city. It's a fantastic primer. Like, don't waste your time with news. Learn some.
Right.
Maybe later we'll learn about Castro Chavism also. Maybe.
I want to get John in here. John, what's your thoughts on the topic? And then I have a few more directions I want to kind of take the conversation, but feel free. Go ahead.
I would have to agree with what Yvonne said about everything. Like, it's all rigged. It's like we really don't know where we're going to go from here. I mean, you guys are a whole lot smarter than me. I'm just your little dummy Trump supporter over here. But yeah, I would have to agree with what Yvonne said.
Right.
I whatever Jose was saying about stuff, I was like, I've never heard that guy before.
Well, that's what we have Jose for, is for the historical perspective, for sure. One of the things in talking about the rigging, the big news, what was it, 2 days ago, was that the Seltzer poll came out of Iowa and basically showed that the state totally flipped from all the other projected polls in the betting markets, that Kamala Harris was up like 3 points, 4 points, something like that. Now, it's the only poll that says that. But at least in my mind, that there was NBC or ABC's teleprompter on one of they're covering like a sports program, and then like what would you call it? The cryon that showed the election showed that Kamala Harris had already won, and it showed like votes tallied at 100%. So what they claimed that they were just testing the cryon, and it happened to come on during the sports program. But me being a little bit more conspiratorial, I kind of see these fake polls and are the lack of trust in the institutions. I mean, it doesn't really, I trust the betting markets more than I trust any political poll that comes out. But allowing the sort of predictive programming that this election is going to be super, super close, right? To me, there seems to be, if you're the establishment, or you really do want to get Kamala in, that one of the things you have to do is create the rhetorical narrative that this thing's going to be neck and neck. That way, when you do steal it, you can always say that it was just like 2020. It was neck and neck. And then she just happened to come out with, 10,000, 20,000 more votes in these swing states, when we would know that if it was legitimate, like, it's not even close. I mean, I think it really is a repeat of Reagan in the 80s. But,
yeah, it's like telling your girlfriend that dresses look good on you over and over again, and then
right,
wearing a dress.
But just to convince, to at least predictive programming to convince the masses that if something nefarious, I mean, we already have multiple states saying it's going to take up a week to count the votes. That, I think a good idea. I've heard somebody suggest that, like, for Arizona, Maricopa County is the one that you always have to watch out for. But the other counties have said that they'll have all their votes in that night. So logic would say they're going to tally all their votes, and then they're going to send them into the state. And then Maricopa County, which said that it's going to take them a week to tally, they'll know exactly how many votes they need. All those other counties should just hold their votes. They should just not turn them in until Maricopa County does. That way they have no idea what the margin of defeat is, or how many votes that they have to rig. But I haven't heard anybody in politics actually say that.
Yeah, that's JFK versus Nixon. That's an example. Like
Right.
literally, counties were waiting down to the line to reveal each other's totals, so that they, each side would then know how much they had to rig. That's also a pretty normal thing. Yeah, I mean, that's a historical thing that goes back pretty far. Yeah, if the other counties are just going to send up their votes automatically, and Maricopa is just taking their time, that tells you where Arizona is going to go. But they're not the only entity that exists out there.
Right.
But it does also tell you that the state elite of Arizona want all their young men. So they want all the young men to go die fighting Russia. So that's, I mean, that's one that should color your own view of the state government if you live in the state of Arizona. And that's something to take into account. Like the state elites that the state that you live in, the local elites that control your state, which way do they push things? And that tells you a lot about whether or not you want to actually even invest in that state. Is long term, or for that matter, what do you call it? Like if you're going to get politically involved, maybe stay more local than state level, and see what you can do or what networks, groups who are potential counter elites within the state that could be supported, to counter those who are ruling over that state.
Right.
For example, so Texas used to be, there was a guy, I'm forgetting his name, but he was the Duke of Duval County. So it was a dynasty here in Texas that were literal kingmakers. They were the ones who actually made LBJ president. So they controlled, originally the grandfather controlled Duval County, which was a rural county in Texas. And then by the time the son was ruling everything, he was controlling, like he was the king in all state elections. So that'll be an example. And of course, they pushed LBJ, so which unleashed the whole civil rights stuff, busing, and the destruction of walkable towns and neighborhoods,
Right.
and immense racial animosity that exceeded anything that existed before. So that's Texas, and that was Texas, and 60 years ago. So, what do you call it? The people who control a state can change over time. And the fact is, the people who run the state of Texas now are very different than the time of the Duval Kingmaker.
Right.
And interestingly enough, the grandson actually pretty much disbanded the entire political machine that his grandfather and father built.
Well, what are your thoughts, though, like with Governor Youngkin in Virginia, that they eliminated, I forget what it was, 30,000 illegal immigrants from the voter rolls, and the DOJ then suing? I mean, and they've done that. I think it's like 5 or 6 cases now. 2 counties in Wisconsin got sued by the DOJ. I think Virginia, a county in Georgia. So the difference to me is that the rigging is so in your face, right? So the Great Replacement's a conspiracy theorist, but they can't wait till certain people are a minority. The illegals are here for refuge, but then we have to make sure that they're allowed to vote. And then if you actually do want paper ballots and you take them off the voter rolls, we're going to sue you by the DOJ, the Department of Justice. Like, it's just so overt and in your face that, I mean, they have nowhere to go. And they really are like an animal backed in the corner. And so is, making sure that the great Third World War pops off before January 6th, that seems pretty plausible. Another assassination attempt seems plausible, although I think that J.D. Vance is maybe worrisome to them because of his youthfulness and the power players behind them, unless, again, there is some oligarchical agreement that's being made that we have no idea about. But, destruction to the grid, mass conflict, civil war. Like, I could see, to me, out of all those scenarios, the one that seems most probable is creating some type of perception of civil war, and that there's no way to certify the legitimacy of the election, but by either side, whichever candidate supposedly wins in the next week. That seems very plausible. So what are your thoughts on just the overtness of the federal government and trying to get in the face of people in states and trying to make this a more legitimate election? I mean, they tell you that, was it not Blinken, or maybe it was Mayorkas, said that illegals are not allowed to vote in the United States on the same day that they filed a lawsuit against Virginia. It's like,
yep. I mean, if you're asking about the DOJ in particular, like the thing with the DOJ is they represent the technocracy, the technocrats. And if what's his name? If Thiel really is serious about the whole what was it, Doge, Department of Government efficiency, that would result. The fact is, the U.S. government could run just fine with 90% fewer bureaucrats. So the entire apparatus, which has all the bureaucratic apparatus, which have their own, we'll say overrepresented interests in how the government runs, have a huge investment in keeping that out. If that is in fact the case, that if Thiel is actually going to do that, and that's something as a test. If Trump wins, the thing I'm wondering is, in terms of hiring decisions, who's the ones deciding what are the list of names that he gets to see? Is it going to be the neocons like it was last time, or is it going to be Thiel who's going to be giving him the names? And are we going to see various members, especially probably lower ranking members of the PayPal mafia, being installed as undersecretaries all over the place? That's something I look forward to seeing. But that's what you're seeing there is a bureaucracy that's trying to keep itself intact. It is functionally a complete parasite at this point. And so, yeah, they have every incentive to do what they're doing. Now, there's two theories I know of. One is like they're being super blatant because they know they can and they just want to shove it down people's faces. And then there's the other, they're running out of options. They can't do it, in hiding anymore. And so they're doing it very blatantly because they're desperate.
That's what it seems like to me. What's your opinion on that? I mean, it seems like they're desperate.
I think it's the second one.
Yeah,
it's the second one because I think the age of X, for example, is very blatant for them. You can't really hide because it's not as if they were hiding it for the whole time. I think they were blatant, but in very subtle ways. It's like paradoxical, but not at the same time, because it's just that we're unraveling how blatant they were over the ages.
Right.
So I think that's the second one.
Well,
I think
that's what I find so interesting too about like Elon Musk's involvement. Now, the Trump coalition with RFK and Tulsi Gabbard and Vivek, and now Ron Paul through Elon Musk potentially going to be involved. I think that's good for the country, especially if Ron Paul gets involved. I think that's wonderful. But where I was going to go, I lost my train of thought. Elon Musk, that Neuralink, Tesla AI, XAI. It's funny to see that. Again, I think it takes a little bit more sophistication to look at the power elite and see that there are different factions, and at the same time, they do have shared similar goals. Like I don't know if Elon Musk is a nationalist per se, but certainly all the corporations he's created are all moving us towards an electric grid, one world structure, in which he'll have access to your brain, access to the most advanced AI, access to the space rockets, and access to the majority of the electric cars in the Western world. And his whole thing is about the fear of AI. AI is an existential threat to humanity. Therefore, we have to fuse with it. Technology is an existential threat to people, but we have to have more people. We're underpopulated, not overpopulated. But at the same time, my Tesla AI is going to do away with all truck driving and everything's going to be automated. Seems like, again, these internal contradictions. And so I can see Elon Musk, being at odds with a Bill Gates or some of these billionaire type peoples. But in the long run, we're really just a couple different paths, but moving towards the same general direction either way. And that's where I think being involved in I'll throw this out here. Some people, I know Orthodox Christians that I've had on these open panels, refuse to be involved in politics, which I don't think is the best idea, because I've said this before, broken record, but like my county, the sheriff, very conservative, great on the coof. We didn't have a lot of the restrictions, and he wasn't going to enforce it. So I think the local government and your local voting for your local officials is very, very important. But ultimately, we're moving towards the same destination. But Trump, if he does win, will benefit my ability to build a family. And as an Orthodox Christian, that's my task right now, is to build a family and support them to the best of my ability. So my point was male turnout. So I recently just saw a thing posted today on X, And this was supposedly by some organization, the latest early voting statistics. And it showed that women had voted like 56%. So women have outvoted men in this election. And there's this big rhetoric right now on right-wing circles about male turnout. Men don't let us down. The women are upholding the. Now, whether the women are voting right or left, we don't know. But it is a fact, at least according to this poll, and you can't trust polls, so I'm not saying that it's legitimate, but according to it, men have not turned out to the same degree as women the day before the election.